Hello, welcome to today's presentation on is it trauma or is it resilience? Are you repeating something bad that happened to you, or are you reclaiming it by using a similar experience to help you feel empowered? That's the question we're going to be asking today. This is the presentation that I did at Southwest Love Fest on May 2nd, 2026. My name is KJB, otherwise known as Jean Brei. I am a licensed professional counselor in Phoenix, Arizona, and I practice in the state of Arizona, Minnesota, Ohio, and Louisiana. I'm the executive director of All Life Transitions, a 501c3 charity here in Phoenix. I'm also a therapist at Trauma Recovery Services of Arizona, the Harbor Counseling, and my own practice, Esoteric Therapy. So today we're going to be getting into it, trying to keep this as brief as possible. Hopefully, a lot of you know about trauma, so we're going to just kind of start there by defining it and figuring out what is it that makes trauma trauma in the first place. Trauma, as a definition, is overall a deeply distressing or disturbing experience. The definition of trauma, as far as the DSM 5, is anything where there is violence, threatened death, or a sexual assault happening to you, to someone you know, um, or listening to the stories of these kinds of things happening in the field in an occupation that you might be working in. There are different types of trauma. As I said, the DSM defines it as violence, threatened death, or sexual assault. However, there is a variety of traumas that are beyond that. And it has been expanded to include what we call little t trauma, which is any adverse experience that you had growing up. The effects of trauma can be wide ranging. They can lead to a significant change in your social functioning, your physical body feelings, as well as your emotional and psychological well being, understanding what is reality, and responding to events in an appropriate emotional way might be compromised. Here are some of our common trauma symptoms: flashbacks, reliving, or repeating. This is where you seem to find yourself in this same situation over and over again and not finding a different result. Avoidance would be avoiding a situation that is similar to that which you experienced. And then hyperarousal or hypervigilance. That is always being on the lookout for potential reminders of the thing that you went through. There are many potential risk factors for who is more likely to experience trauma. Having prior trauma, not having a supportive community, and predetermined mental health conditions, either chemical or environmental. Those are significant risk factors to whether or not someone is going to be experiencing trauma again. Here's a quote from me: people are haunted by trauma, or people haunted by trauma are usually revisiting or avoiding reminders. This slide details a tendency that I have witnessed in my practice. It's called the pendulum effect. The pendulum effect is the tendency for avoidance to lead to an opposite experience in the next generation. So, if the first generation has the experience of a trauma, let's say alcoholism, for example, the next generation will avoid alcoholism like the plague and therefore become overly intense in their avoidance and becoming more like a codependent or an Al-Anon person who might end up with an alcoholic and not be wanting to be with one, however, avoiding alcohol themselves, and so on and so forth. Then the next generation would be alcoholic again. This is true for almost every kind of addictive behavior or trauma, whether it is novelty seeking, sex, relationship dysfunction. You can see how this might come to pass as a pattern. Here's some examples of how this would come to pass: reliving or avoiding. So the pendulum effect would say that each generation would slide back and forth from reliving to avoiding. I'm not going to read the entire slide here, but you can pause at this time if you'd like to review the extreme responses to like parental infidelity, physical abuse, emotional abuse, sexual assault, parental neglect, religious trauma, or parental divorce. This leads us to our topic of alternative communities. Alternative communities being those who participate in alternative sexual orientations, alternative relationship styles, and alternative sexual interests. There is a lot of stigma from neurotypicals, people who live in the majority. They may not understand how trauma influences and informs these decisions, and whether or not these decisions or lifestyles are healthy. So let's get into it. For example, there are stereotypes around homosexuality, historically and currently, especially currently in today's administration. There has been an impression that being LGBTQ, specifically in this case, lesbian and gay, is influenced by something happening to a child, right? They might not have been born that way. It's like a choice or something that could be biblically avoided. There are stereotypes around our friends in the bi and pansexuality realm, often labeled as confused, promiscuous, not being able to make up their mind. These people historically experience disenfranchisement from both the homosexual and heterosexual realm of sexuality. Trans and trauma. Our trans brothers and sisters out here are struggling the most right now. Again, they are not considered to be born that way. They are considered to be made by some kind of traumatic experience, groomed, perhaps. These are stereotypes, so these are not true, right? These are not true. And then they also experience violence and disenfranchisement as like kind of the same thing where they are excluded from using a particular bathroom. It's very similar from the experience of being excluded from using a certain water fountain or sitting at a certain place on the bus. People who are traumatized often have carried trauma. This is referred to as intergenerational, transgenerational, or generational trauma. And basically, this is just the scientific understanding that if traumatizing things happen to your ancestors, it affects the way that the genes function within the body. And therefore, the trauma of your ancestors can still be experienced or influenced through you. So you are still carrying the trauma of those ancestors in the way your genes are expressed. This trauma that you experienced from your parents, maybe your parents' parents, can be carried in your system and play out in many ways if you are in a relationship that is ethically non monogamous. And this contributes to a lot of the breakdowns in ethically non monogamous relationships. I'd like to go over some of those examples at this time. One of the common stereotypes around E&M is that there is a sex focus and that it roots in the desire to be promiscuous. That is, again, a stereotype, not always true. There's a stereotype that people who are ethically non monogamous don't have the ability to commit to a person. They are avoiding some level of real commitment by not being monogamous. There's also kind of an idea in the E&M world from neurotypicals or people who are monogamous that it's just a phase or a trend, something that is passing, that they won't be interested in after a while. Also, definitely consider that potentially these people weren't raised right. They might have had bad parents or operate in the realm of being immoral. Again, a stereotype, not necessarily true. More stereotypes. These are stigmatized practices inside of ethical non monogamy. The first one is unicorn hunting. This would be couples having a heteronormative experience where they have couple privilege, meaning the couple is um, primary in the situation and seeking out a third, either a male or female, to be in a deprioritized role. This does happen, but it is not always happening uh, when people are looking for a third partner. Partner collecting. This is another stereotype where people who see ethically non monogamous or polyamorous people as just trying to create the biggest roster that they can and date as many people as possible. It is easy to quit ethical non monogamy before the magic happens if people are repeating their trauma unconsciously. It can definitely not seem worth it if the people in the situation are not handling their own emotions consciously or able to communicate about it effectively. And this is why a lot of people stop doing ethical non monogamy before it starts actually working out for them, usually because they don't have the tools or the skills to operate within that relationship structure functionally. Often this comes because of an experience with jealousy. Jealousy is a natural reaction. It is something that happens evolutionarily to try to maintain the ability to pass on our genetics to the next generation, right? So it would make sense that we would have jealousy to try to preserve our genetic code being passed on by procreation, right? Jealousy is a natural reaction, but it is exacerbated by emotional abuse, parental neglect, parental abandonment, and just toxic shame, not feeling like you're good enough in general. Also, it is socially reinforced. Jealousy is socially reinforced by emphasizing the position of the partner as something that is mine. Uh, we have to think about our partners as free and autonomous. They belong to themselves. Was the person who was jealous treated like they were a belonging or a possession non consensually, either as a child or in a past relationship? They might have trauma from jealousy itself. Here are some of the typical stereotypes of BDSM. People who don't know the culture, people who don't know what they're getting into, may think about BDSM in these terms. And I will go over each one of these individually. BDSM is short for bondage, discipline, dominance, submission, and sadomasochism. From the outside, people might assume that people engage in BDSM practices because they were physically abused as a child. There is a trope that a overworked workaholic person might want to be subjugated just to have a break from being the decision maker in their normal life. Sometimes this is a place where people can see that a victim will then become an abuser. So, because of what was done to me, I now want to do this to someone else. It is seen as an acceptable place to potentially be an abuser. There are stereotypes, and this is very common, that if you go into a BDSM community, you are more likely to be engaging with risky people who will actually hurt and victimize you. Um, People might think that people get into BDSM because they did not have enough discipline growing up, or maybe they had too much discipline growing up. This one's tricky. People who were molested as a child might turn into adults that have an interest in age play, which is doing scenes in which one person is presenting or pretending to be younger than another. That is potentially possible, but again, a stereotype doesn't apply to all people who are interested in those scenes. Neglect and deprivation. It is very possible that people who were neglected and deprived may end up wanting to be neglected and deprived in a BDSM context, but it's not always the case. Some people are interested in it for other reasons. And then mommy daddy issues. Obviously, this is a large one. There are actual roles of mommy and daddy within the BDSM structure, especially with power exchange, and the nurturing that comes with that potentially can be reparative for people who had problems with their own mommy or daddy. But assuming that anybody who is in the BDSM community has mommy or daddy issues is stereotyping and disenfranchisement. In social psychology, a stereotype is a fixed, overgeneralized belief about a particular group or class of people. It may apply to many, but not everyone in the group. So let's define where we're going with this, right? Where are we going with this? What is the point of reviewing these stereotypes that are related to our sexual lives, being involved potentially in the traumas we've experienced? Well, we want to recover. We want to be resilient and bounce back from those traumas, right? Resilience is bouncing back from those traumas and not being as affected as we once were. Reclamation is potentially engaging in behaviors that look like those traumas, but actually having a positive outcome from it, right? So, resilience and reclamation, they exist together, but they can also be two separate things, right? It may be that resilience is not participating in something that is reminiscent of our trauma. It may be that that is not um, something that works well for us. The attributes of resilience and reclamation depends on the way that the world is viewed, right? What frame are we putting on the picture? It's important to know whether we have community and whether we have specific coping strategies to be using around these ideas. Brain adaptation. It has been found that people who are trying to recover can create new neural pathways in their brain if they take certain steps, use certain interventions. We can change our brain. Even if the neural pathway we had was very well set, it is always possible to change the way our brain works. So again, resilience. How do we know whether we will be able to bounce back and be less affected from our trauma. It requires these three things: a community, strong social support around whatever it is that you're trying to recover from, coping skills. Do you actually have the toolbox for dealing with the emotions that actually are coming up around these things? And self care. How much are you actually taking care of yourself as opposed to expecting other people to take care of you? Building resilience takes strategies. It's important to embrace challenges and keep on a growth path. This might require a positive mindset and looking for small wins. The role of social support is essential. We cannot grow and improve socially if we are not engaged in a relationship where we can actually address the attachment, right? If we do not engage with other people, we are not going to be able to practice these skills within an attachment context. So the attachment styles are really important in this. Are we able to securely attach to the people that we are interacting with? Or are we avoiding those connections? Or are we overly anxious about losing those connections? Or the combination of the two, which would be disorganized or avoidant fearful, we are at the same time avoiding the connection with the person while being extremely clingy and anxious about whether or not we will lose it, right? If we aren't in relationship with people, we cannot tell what's happening with our own behavior. And if we can't tell what's happening with our own behavior, then we can't change it. So, this is why it's so important to have community, to meet people who have the ability to grow with us. And there are alternative community groups out there that can provide that social support, that can give us maybe the chosen family that we always needed from which to grow. Maybe those things that we didn't ever grow when we were young and we needed to. So I recommend getting involved with pride organizations, engaging in LGBTQ nightlife, getting involved with polyamory social media or local events. Do you have a local power exchange? Can you be a member of your local, BDSM dungeon? Subscribe to Kink social media. Get on the message boards. Find out where people are getting together. If you have trouble finding someone who is a good social support, don't give up. Continue to seek out someone who has the ability to move through this with you. Here are my recommendations for the best coping mechanisms. First is meditation or mindfulness, meditation being the clearing of the mind, and mindfulness being the filling of the mind with immediate sensory experience. So we can either clear our mind or we can fill it with tuning into our five senses. Physical movement. Physical movement is going to move the trauma body and balance the vagus nerve and the nervous system. So things like yoga, tai chi, running, working out, these are all going to be essential to making sure that we have what it takes to reduce our emotional response. And creative expression, letting out that experience in a way, whether it's writing, singing, playing music, drawing, painting, like releasing whatever it is out of the body through a creative expression. We must make sure to have our self-care in place, nurturing your well-being. Self-care practices are extremely important and sometimes we overlook them, like showering, brushing our teeth, seeing our therapist, taking our meds, taking our vitamins. These are all self-care practices that if we put these on the routine every day, we are way more likely to be having a conscious experience around whether we are repeating our trauma or reclaiming it. So let's start understanding that path to reclamation, checking in with yourself before, during, and after the experience. This is a 3-step process. Before you do a thing, check in with yourself, you know? While you're doing a thing, checking in with yourself. After you've done the thing, check in with yourself. Most importantly, how do you feel? How does your body feel? I cannot downgrade the role of therapy in this process. It is extremely important to use intervention methods that will support you in living a trauma informed life, especially if you're engaging in practices that look similar to your trauma, right? We want to make sure that you have like a solid trauma informed alternative lifestyle affirming therapist on board, which I am, to help you kind of weed out like, do I actually want to be engaging in what I'm engaging in and why? So let's actually go through these phases. I promised you guys that I would make you a presentation that teaches you how to become more conscious, how to wake up to whether or not you are truly healing yourself or hurting yourself more with what you're doing. First, safety. Make sure that you're not hurting yourself or anyone else with what you're doing. Consent is always primary, making sure that everybody on board has fully consented to what's going on. Remembering. So, knowing the memory that whatever you're doing is related to, that is the remembrance process, right? Just connecting the two things. And then reclamation. Now that you're awake and aware, you can make an intentional decision. Like, is this thing that I'm doing that seems really similar something that I find empowering or something that's hurting me deeply? It is so important to be self aware because after the experience, there are generally 3 subjective emotional experiences: either self shaming, which is self stigmatizing, being confused, or feeling empowered. Those are the 3 things that can happen after you do something that seems similar. So let's set the stage for creating that trauma informed experience. There are specific questions to ask yourself before you go engage in a behavior. Is this related to something that happened to me? That's connecting the memory. Is this something that I want to do, or is this something I'm being coerced into by someone else? What are the unconscious needs and wants that are related to the behavior? What am I trying to get out of this? Is this behavior actually going to get me those things? And what is my body like? Checking in with a body scan, like my intuition, my gut feeling. How is my body telling me to how to proceed? Does this feel like it's the way to go? Similar questions during the experience while I'm actually doing the thing. Hey, am I reliving a trauma? Again, doing a body scan. Where's my intuition? Where's my gut feeling? How does this feel in my body? When I check in with my intuition, does this align with my spirit, my higher self? And are my wants and needs actually being met? And are they my wants or needs? Or are they someone else's? Are they mine? Are they my ancestors? Someone else? Questions after the experience. Looking back, you can see things with more clarity. Is this something that I feel I have to do in secret? Is it something I would not share with the world? Have I developed a supportive community around what I'm doing? Do I have people around me who understand why I'm doing what I'm doing? How do I actually feel looking back on it emotionally? Right? Maybe this is where you do a body scan again, right? Where's my gut and my intuition looking in the rearview mirror? Would I do this again? Would I do it again? And what does this say about who I am? Like, is this a defining moment? Like, does this define me in some way? After it's all over, how do you feel about yourself? What do you think about yourself ultimately? Let's talk about what self stigmatization might look like, right? It's feeling shame. You might discriminate against yourself, right? Exclude yourself from social situations, label yourself as bad, and say that you fit into a specific stereotype, right? Discriminating against yourself, what does that look like? I can't go here. I'm not worth it. I won't give myself the opportunity to feel joy in this way. You have to ask yourself, has your behavior become an addiction, right? If you're doing a thing over and over again, is it healthy that you're doing it so much, right? When we, especially in the kink fetish world, right? Has it become an unhealthy obsession? If you're just using it occasionally, this would be kind of occasional healthy participation with the consent of all involved. Misuse of the activity would potentially be like, oh, this is risky. It might violate ethical, which would be consent, or legal guidelines and get me in trouble. So now I'm doing things that kind of are potentially problematic. Abuse. This is the kind of behavior that has led actually to adverse health or legal consequences. So now it's a form of self abuse. This could be related to, permanent marks on the body, or now I have to go to the doctor for STDs more often. And then dependency and addiction is continuing to do the behavior after you have like severely negative consequences like that, health wise, legal wise, maybe socially. Maybe socially you've had major problems and you continue to do the behavior regardless. Also, a very good question is, do I end up engaging in other addictive behaviors to self medicate the emotional outcomes of these experiences? So, like, am I using substances or alcohol or something like that to feel better after I do, or before or during while I'm doing this behavior? And also, has this isolated me from my family and friends? Do I no longer talk to people because this is a lifestyle, routine, or behavior that I engage in? Like, have I become alone in this? If you experience confusion, even after using all of these strategies, you can get more support. And it's so important if you're confused to get more support. Engaging in trauma regularly on a weekly or bi weekly basis while you're still in this discovery process is so important. There's support groups, you know, kink dungeons and power exchange organizations often have support groups for things like being a sub, being a dom, being in poly relationships. Engage in the community education that's available to you. It is out there, and there are mentors that will help you. You can ask for one on FetLife if you really are looking for one. There are people out there wanting to mentor other people. Limit your time with other people who don't see what you're doing as positive if you're trying to see it as positive. And keep more people around who are encouraging to you. Ultimately, we can overcome challenges together. If we're trying to reclaim a behavior that is reminiscent of something we went through, that was adversity when it happened initially, and now we're trying to do a similar thing and have it be a good, healthy, sexy, empowering experience. We have to reframe. We have to reframe the perspective on the experience. The first step to reframing is value reversal. We are no longer looking at this thing as a bad thing. We are now trying to look at it or attempting to see it as a good thing, right? So no longer bad, now it's good, right? So one of the reasons to use those judgment calls, right? Neutralization. So after we've taken it from bad to good, we neutralize the emotional effect that it had on us. So no longer are we actually experiencing the pain and suffering that we did initially with this experience and exploiting the stigma, right? So, yes, where I used to feel shame and the taboo caused me to feel icky, I am now feeling like this is what makes me awesome, right? This is what makes me sexy. This is what makes me um, empowered. I'm basically taking it back for myself, taking the experience back for myself and making it something that puts me in an elevated place. The power of reappropriation. So it's so important to look at reappropriation, which is basically taking something that used to harm and taking it for your own purposes, right? Taking it for your own purposes, making it the thing that brings light to your life instead of the darkness. I got these concepts from a peer reviewed journal by Robin Bronsinger. And the peer reviewed journal is listed in the very last slide of this presentation. He said there was 3 steps to reclamation. We just went over them. Rendering the experience separable from the previous injurious power, so it can no longer hurt me. Deaden it. Make it incapable of inspiring anything, shame or pride. And then use the thing that used to injure as now a source of inspiration, a belonging, and celebration. What does it feel like? So this is a quote from the actual peer-reviewed journal from Bronsima. And so I just want to read it out loud. When I read this out loud at Love Fest, I did almost bring a tear to my eye. It says, can an experience completely shed its history of abuse? Can we experience a transformational metamorphosis so that the experience no longer resembles that which it once was? Can a medicine be concocted from its poison? Can its fate be forcefully determined? Or does the experience forever carry pain within it? Is it subservient to its own history? Must it reenact the drama of its own genesis as trauma reenactment? Can it never remove its shackles and it declare its own emancipation? Are the things that we are engaging in the antidote created from what was the poison of our trauma? Can we reclaim and reappropriate some of these behaviors or experiences that potentially we might not be able to actually get away from? Reclaim and reappropriate them as now our guiding light, our sense of peace, our personal power. Here are some additional resources for support. I'm from Arizona, so I am giving you some Arizona resources. Phoenix Pride, like the Queer Center, Arizona Power Exchange, which is the local BDSM dungeon, Power Exchange dungeon, and then All Hearts Cooperative, which is a open relationship educational space where they provide relationship workshops regularly here in the Valley. And then online, there's always the LGBTQ National Help Center, polyamoryinfo.org, and the FetLife.com message boards can be extremely helpful when talking about how kink and fetish experiences, lifestyle orientation experiences, can be reclaiming. There are a lot of people doing really great work on themselves, trauma work, inside the message boards of FetLife.com. What I'm talking about today is not new news. There is a lot of information out there about how living life authentically through relationship and sexual freedom can be trauma informed reclamation, right? We're starting to talk about how some of these lifestyles might potentially be a better fit for certain diagnoses, such as autism, ADHD, and potentially borderline personality. And also, there are a lot of thinkers, psychologists, etc., who are starting to think about how kink and fetish can, and BDSM and power exchange can operate through a trauma informed lens to help people grow, to get them to a place where that trauma is integrated and no longer harming them, no longer creating a functional impairment in their life. A functional impairment meaning that they have difficulty operating in the workplace, in the social setting, or potentially in school or their relationships. It's important to raise awareness of this by becoming an advocate. Raising awareness and reducing stigma in society is always important. You can do this on three different levels. On an individual level, it's important to look at the way that you look at yourself, affirm yourself and others around you in their journey, and look at your own implicit biases against these people and these lifestyles and these experiences. On an organizational level, talk to the people where you work or in other groups that you're involved in. See if there can be a way to change policies so that it can be more affirming for people who are on these trauma informed journeys of reclamation. And at the community level, put yourself out there publicly, host educational talks. Be out if you can on social media with your polyamory or your kink or however you are experiencing things. Because there are other people that may be out there needing to know that it's a safe place to do so, and you sharing that will create that safe space. Again, looking at your own implicit bias. If you're judging other people, look at how you're doing that and wonder about, what their history of trauma is and what journey they're on individually and at what pace they might be on in that journey. We can't um, we can't always help people do better, but judging people or judging ourselves is never going to help them or ourselves move to the goalpost any faster. Confucius once said, "Our greatest glory is not in never falling, but in rising every time that we fall." Failure is inevitable if you are on the path to success, because in order to succeed, you have to try. And if you try, you will fail. And you Fail you will, but you will get back up and try again, because the only way to get to the success is to keep trying after failure. So we must not fear failure if we want to succeed. This is the part in the PowerPoint where we ask what your thoughts are. But you are on the internet, so you don't have any thoughts right now. But if you have thoughts, you can put them in the comment section down below, because I would love to hear what you think about this and how you think I might be able to improve this PowerPoint and this presentation so people can better understand how to be on this journey of becoming a conscious individual who is operating within a structure where they are not unconsciously repeating something, but consciously reclaiming something, consciously reappropriating something into something that feels good for everyone involved. Here's the slide with my references. These are some of the peer reviewed journals and other places where I got some of the information that have been adapted for this PowerPoint presentation. So I really appreciate if you would like to look up more information. You can take a screenshot or pause on this slide and then go to these references and read more. All right, this is the end of this presentation. So live in person, this presentation was 90 minutes. We were able to get through it at 46 minutes today. Short and hopefully sweet. This is my first time recording this without an audience. So kind of give me a little bit of kudos, hopefully down with the likes, subscribe. Give me some put ups in the comments. If you want to get into contact with me, this is my contact information. I am a licensed therapist, again, in the state of Arizona, Ohio, um, Ohio, Louisiana, and Minnesota. So I am available for actual therapy if you would like to work on some of these things in a detailed way with professional support. Also, I am open to training in person. So if you have a place or a time where you see any of the trainings here on this channel and find interest in them and want them presented in person, I am open to doing keynote speeches and workshops wherever they are available. So reach out if that is something that you think we could collaborate on. I really appreciate you sticking with me through this entire presentation, and I hope that it was helpful. I hope that you found a little bit of a light potentially in the dark attic of your mind so that you can see all the really interesting, cool, antique things that might be hanging out up there, just waiting to be utilized for your best benefit. All right. Again, like and subscribe. I appreciate you, and let's become the most consciously evolved versions of ourselves that we can through knowledge, consent, and exploration. Exploration. All right. Bye.